Hi guys from Canada. At my course we have homework checking sessions when I open projects of my students, and even very experienced students make this huge mistake. Nobody will care how good your compressor is set up or how great your EQ curve is until you set up volume balance properly by the fader. This mistake commonly goes from not understanding the concept that fader is equalizer. Today I'm gonna show you 8 eye-opening cases. Some of those will blow your mind. By the way, the cool thing is you can attend one class for free of one of the most powerful audio production courses. It's 9 months online. I don't convince you by words. I convince you in a real way by showing you one class for free. You will be connected to a real class with my students who are taking this course right now, so you can view exactly how we study. Hundreds of students graduated over the last 9 years, and as I mentioned, we have unique homework check-in sessions as a bonus. The information about me, my course, and 260 reviews you can find in the first pinned comment or in the description. But instead of reading, I offer you much better way. Attend one class for free, because nobody knows better than you what works for you. And ask for the course details in email. How to contact me to get a free trial class. The information is in the first pinned comment or in the description or on the screen. Okay, let's start with the first case, but don't forget, some of those cases will blow your mind, so who knows which one will be the most eye-opening for you. Check it out. And first concept is, one instrument equalizes the other instrument. What? Like, instrument equalizes the other instrument? Let me show you. Listen to the snare drum, and notice in advance that fader stays at +3 decibels position. Now let's say you want to make the snare quieter, because maybe it's annoying, and a lot of people think that volume is just a matter of taste. You know, make it louder, make it quieter, but no, you cannot change it by your taste. You have to have specific volume because a fader is equalizer. Let's try to make the snare drum quieter. If you put it -0.5 dB like right now on the screen, you lose a bit of clarity, punch, and details of the snare drum in the mix. Basically what you did, you re-equalized your snare drum for the worse because you lost upper mid-range details. If you want to know why, I'm gonna show you this amazing explanation. Check it out. I'm gonna call this instrument lead bass. It's this instrument. It has lows, mids, and highs actually, so it's not just bass, so I'm gonna call it lead bass. It has very prominent upper mid-range. This is the frequency response of this lead bass. What frequency snare drum occupies in comparison to this lead bass? Fader of the snare drum at -0.5. Do you see any frequencies where snare drum cuts through the bass? Little bit, around 2.5. Just over here a bit, and that's it. It's the only frequency the snare drum has to cut through this lead bass. If I put the snare drum at position +3, I chose this level not because of I liked it. It was the only volume which made snare drum sound right in the mix. Why it sounds right is because of this. Look at my mouse cursor, 2.3, this is where snare drum cuts through the mix right now. 2.5, much more prominent at least. Next, 2.8. Next, 3K, 5.6, 6.5, 7.5, and 9.5. So we have literally like 7 new frequencies where snare drum has some space right now. This is why in the mix you hear details of upper mid-range, almost like you boosted upper mid-range by equalizer on the snare drum. You hear more prominent frequencies. It's almost like you re-equalize your snare drum by just boosting volume of the snare drum. Also, we can say in opposite way. When snare drum was too quiet, lead bass was equalizing snare drum, masking its upper mid-range. So it's almost like lead bass made upper mid-range of the snare drum less boosted. By volume push, lead bass doesn't hide those upper mid-range frequencies of the snare drum anymore. And this is how you can say lead bass right now doesn't equalize snare drum. Fader and lead bass, both things actually equalizers your snare drum right now. First thing is fader. You change audible frequencies of the snare drum by the fader. But also, lead bass actually equalizes your snare drum by either masking some frequencies of the snare drum or allowing those frequencies to go through. In different words, you move the fader of the snare drum for frequency correction of the snare drum. Crazy, right? Those who have doubts can say, yes, but you can apply just equalizer, right, to boost upper mid-range, and this is how you actually get frequency correction. Let's try. I'm gonna put this snare drum back to minus 0.5, where I believe it's a wrong level for the snare drum. You apply equalizer. I do it basically like by 4 dB. And yes, now you hear more prominent details of the upper mid-range of the snare drum. It cuts through the lead bass for sure. However, this equalizer makes the snare drum thinner. Let's compare. By the fader it will be sounding much better. It will be full fat sounding snare drum, but it still will have punch, details and upper mid. Second option will be this equalizer, which will sound again right. It will have punch and upper mid-range and details. However, in general, the snare drum will be like thin, annoying and not so interesting sounding. Let's make A-B comparison. Fader minus 0.5 and EQ is on. Option 2. Fader is plus 3, EQ is off. Smoother, more pleasant, more enjoyable. And all details and punch needed in place. Let's compare again. So you EQ upper mid-range of the snare drum by just changing volume by the fader. Example with the vocal. Notice how this vocal has lack of low mid, it sounds thin. Now I make it louder, and vocal sounds fat. It has rounder, like fatter, low mid range. I'm still feeling guilty 'cause you wanted me to stay. Now you see the print screen of the first case when vocal was too thin. Its fundamental tone and its second harmonic drowns under the mix. Green is the mix, white is the vocal. Now on the screen you can see the second case where I made vocal louder, and as you can see, fundamental tone of the vocal and second harmonic of the vocal louder than the mix, and that's why vocal sounds fatter. So you re-equalize low mid of the vocal. Now the second case. By the way, don't forget to find an email in the first pinned comment to attend one free trial class of one of the most powerful audio production courses. Another crazy case is quite interesting, check it out. Let's say you try to EQ this guitar. I'm not necessarily sure this guitar needs it, but let's say you really want this like extra bite for this guitar, so you boost, let's say 5K. More like you know, kind of sound. Obviously, because of you boosted a lot of upper mid, guitar sounds a bit thinner, and you say let's get some body. So you boost 100 Hz on this guitar. You know, like those like super fat ass guitar amplifiers. Just because of you boosted those frequencies, guitar in the mix sounds a bit too loud, right? You don't hear drums, you don't hear bass too much, so you decide to compensate volume and you put this guitar just a bit quieter. I made it only 1 dB quieter and we already have no lows. Before, guitar had this like boo, 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 boo. And now guitar again sounds like boo, 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 boo. You know, like very thin. So it's another example how fader re-equalizes your sound basically. So now what you need to do, you need to come back to equalizer and you need to put extra lows to have at least some size, some bottom end of your guitar. So I have to go over here. And I boosted at least 1 extra dB, you know, on the bottom end, just because I had to make guitar quieter. Even though I had equalizer in place, and I already found great sound. After fader correction, I again changed all frequencies. This is just a perfect example how a fader is an extra equalizer. Third case, there is no like punch in the beginning of the kick. You apply EQ and let's say you boost upper mid-range on this kick. there is still not enough punch, you know what I mean? But you already boosted plenty of upper mid that it almost sounds like noisy and, you know, like dirty. This kick sample has some like noise on the top, so the more you boost over here, the more this noise will be prominent. Instead of working with frequencies by equalizer, you should work in this case with frequencies by the fader. It's absolutely crazy one, check it out. If you know kicks, you understand that in the beginning of the kick drum there is little punch. Usually on these parts of the kicks you have no lows and you have plenty of upper mid. As you can see, no lows, and it has tones like 2K, 3K, 5K, 7K kind of. If you listen to the tail of the kick drum individually, again, you don't need frequency analyzer for it. I use frequency analyzer just only to prove my point because a lot of people don't know how to hear. And this is the tail, and as you can see, it has mostly lows. It has all these like 50 Hz and stuff. Ask yourself, if you boost just on general equalizer on this kick 3K, it means you're gonna boost 3K on this tail. This tail anyway doesn't contain the punch. There is nothing to boost around 3K other than noise. What's cool over here, the beginning of this kick already have plenty of those details around like 3K. So instead of applying EQ, I'd rather just to make this initial kick just more loud by the fader. I can exaggerate the beginning of this kick by automation, let's say like this. You can use many different ways to do it. Let's say it could be a compressor, transient shapers, manual editing, whatever it is. I just show you it's about volume. Those 3Ks which already in the sound will be just louder and it will be more than enough and you don't need any EQ. And actually it sounds 3 times better than EQ. I have automation line on all those kicks, all those transients in the beginning just manually boosted. So I bypass equalizer. Sounds much better, less noisy, more punchy, more prominent. So I boosted 3K, not by boosting 3K on equalizer, but I boosted just the area of the kicks, waveform, where this 3K actually exists. Crazy, right? Fader is equalizer. Next case, it's a Fletcher-Munson curve. According to physics rules, your ears are not linear. So for you, if something sounds louder, you feel like more lows, more highs. If you make something quieter, for your ears, it sounds like less lows, less highs, which means like more mids. If you make this vocal quieter, it would be a bit like more mid-range. It will not have this like full fat low end and those like very open highs. It will be more like you know, like those mid-range like this.
I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay. I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
More lows, more highs, more presence, more openness, more bottom end. The same with the bass. Bass, however, doesn't have highs, so you're probably gonna exaggerate just lows. When this bass is quiet, it sounds quite thin.
I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
You make this bass louder and it sounds like really low-endy, really fat.
I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
So the question is why the bass itself sounds fatter as an instrument. It's because of Flatcher-Munson Rule. Same principle in this mix. Distorted electric guitars, they don't have highs. It cannot be Fletcher-Munson effect for highs because there is no highs literally over here. But it can be for lows because electric guitar has some low end, at least upper bass. Don't even think about bass, think about guitar itself. Guitar itself in the mix sounds like thinner. You make it louder and it sounds fatter. This like you know, kind of. So definitely much more prominent because of Fletcher-Munson effect. Next case, if your instrument in a mix occupies very specific frequency range and you make this instrument, let's say, much louder, you're gonna make this particular frequency range much more prominent in the mix. If you make it quieter, the whole mix sounds like somebody put EQ and dropped down those frequencies exactly in this area. For example, this bass is very low frequency instrument, right? This bass almost doesn't have mids, and this bass almost doesn't have highs. It has only lows. Which means if I make this bass in the mix just louder, it would be like almost like during mastering somebody boosted lows on your mix.
I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
Now if I make this bass quieter, it's almost like somebody during mastering put an equalizer on your whole song, so I just put bass down, and you're gonna have empty, thin sounding mix.
Now I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
Right? So it's not just volume of the bass, it's the low end of the whole mix basically. So you almost like feel like no lows in the mix when this bass quiet. And you feel like fat lows of the whole mix when this bass is loud.
Now I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay. Now I'm still feeling guilty cause you wanted me to stay.
Crazy, right? For some of you it will be very obvious, but for some of you it will be eye-opening really. The same here. It's one of those unusual hi-hats which doesn't have any mids, which means it's mostly just high frequencies. If I make this hi-hat relatively quiet, the whole mix will be like more mid-range and not as bright. The only reason why, because this hi-hat doesn't occupy all frequency ranges, it occupies only highs, and obviously if you make hi-hat louder, and the whole mix sounds like brighter. The problem is your audio engineering theory commonly comes from plugin manufacturers' commercials. They try to sell you another equalizer. They don't want you to understand that your main equalizer is the fader. So they try hard to convince you that EQing is all about improving the individual tone of individual instruments. But EQing is also balancing of instruments with each other, how they come together. And the fader plays a huge part in it. Next case, this one just mind-blowing. A lot of people convince themselves that they like equalization curves, not because of equalization curves is suitable, but just because of it makes more proper volume. Let's say you chose incorrect volume of this electric guitar, you made it too quiet. So they feel maybe like guitar sounds not clear enough, so they want maybe a bit more bite to the sound or something. Again, I say it's actually incorrect move here, but let's say people do it like this. And now it sounds powerful, loud, and people say, yeah, this is about EQ, I need it. But the problem is, don't you think it sounds kind of annoying? It sounds like like this. How about instead of this equalizer, just boosting volume? Let's compare how it was before. I'm trying to say that instead of having incorrect volume in the first place and getting proper volume just by strange equalization curves, which makes actually your guitar annoying, try to find proper volume first, and maybe you will not need this equalization, which makes your guitar annoying. So instead, you're gonna have nice guitar but sound smooth and pleasant. And next case, opposite situation. Let's say you start with too loud instrument in a mix. Notice how this bass sounds too loud in a mix. Instead of putting it down in volume, you may decide it's about some like too much mid frequencies. You put those mids down. And in terms of volume balance, right now it's much more suitable. And it's obvious because you lower down 50% of the mid frequency energy of this bass. And bass now has correct volume. And you may believe this equalization curve is just right for your mix, because it just sounds right in volume. But the problem is, by this equalizer, you made this bass like hollow, like empty, not as warm, not as kind of cool, you know. Let's make bass just quieter by itself to start with. It sounds rounder, it sounds warmer, and it has proper volume. And it doesn't have this like annoying hollow sound in it. It's not necessarily an example where fader is equalizer. It's more like an example how important volume is. And even more important than equalizer. For example, in first case, we had incorrect volume, and equalizer made it more or less, but the tone of bass was just ugly. Instead, you started with most important thing with volume, and you just didn't spoil the frequency response of your bass. By the way, guys, don't forget, I put only 10% of the power of my course to my videos. If you want the real deal, get one free trial class with my students who are taking this course right now to check it out my course, and after a trial class you can enroll. This course is relatively affordable. It costs like 3-4 plugins, like one decent microphone or pair of monitors. But those things don't don't guarantee results. My course guarantees results. How to contact me to attend the free trial class? The information is in the first pinned comment or in the description or on the screen.